Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Daybreak this beautiful morning. It is a beautiful Friday morning. It's a cool, day, a cool weather. Thank God for that because for the past few days or few weeks, it's been relatively hot. I'm Dasha and Husseina Osman, and thank you so much for tuning in. I'm not alone in the studio this morning.
I'm Sagir Ibrahim. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Daybreak this morning. For some reason, Husseina is always particular about the weather. I don't know why. You either tell us how hot it's been or how cold it's been.
There's actually, a way the weather is kind of connected to how we live our daily lives.
How you live your daily life. So now don't bring us into this thing.
No, honestly, it is connected.
First of all, you look really floral and regal.
Thank you.
Then back to what I was saying about. Thank you.
And the reason why I actually said this is because it's been, if you look at recent years, it's been getting hotter and hotter and hotter, especially in Abuja. Have you ever imagined what would happen or how we would live if it gets even hotter than this? Because sometimes, as hot as this, the ACs don't even work in your homes.
That's a good question. But like I was saying earlier, you're particular about the weather because it's always hot for you, and you've been complaining about the weather being too hot. So let's state it as it is. Global warming is here. It's getting more serious, and the weather is getting hotter and hotter. Places that are naturally cool are now getting warmer. So this brings us to the reason why we need to be more particular about how we treat our environment. Mother Earth is for all of us, and what we give to it is what we get back, right?
Exactly, and that's why the weather is very important.
Okay, let's start with headlines this morning. Ghana approves Oxford malaria vaccine for children.
Brain drain. Many qualified doctors still unemployed in Nigeria, says NMA president.
And there's this story about shisha smoking increasing risks of heart diseases.
Now let's take a look at the details. Ghana on Thursday said it is the first country in the world to approve a new malaria vaccine from Oxford University with children under the age of 3 years in line to benefit. The mosquito-borne disease kills more than 600,000 people each year, and most of them children in Africa, and scientists have been trying for years to develop vaccines. It is unclear when the Oxford vaccine will be rolled out in Ghana. Childhood vaccines in Africa are typically paid for by international organizations such as Gavi and UNICEF after they have been backed by the World Health Organization, which is still assessing the vaccine's safety and effectiveness. However, Oxford scientist Adrian Hill said Ghana's drug regulator has approved it for the age group at the highest risk of death from malaria, that's children aged 5 months to 36 months. However, lack of funding and commercial potential thwarted the company's capacity to produce as many doses as needed. GSK, that's GlaxoSmithKline, has committed to producing up to 15 million doses of Mosquirisk every year through 2028, well under the roughly 100 million doses a year of the 4-dose vaccine the WHO says is needed long-term to cover around 25 million children. Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi were all involved in the pilot program for the rollout of Mosquirisk and have begun rolling it out more widely in recent months. Since it began in 2019, 1.2 million children across the 3 countries have received at least 1 dose of the vaccine.
And away from that, the president of the Nigerian Medical Association, Dr. Uche Roland Ojima, has said in spite of the brain drain in the health sector, many qualified doctors in Nigeria are still not employed. He disclosed this while speaking on the exodus of Nigerian medical practitioners leaving the country for greener pastures abroad. Recently, a bill was sponsored by a lawmaker from Lagos, Honorable Ganiu Abiodun Johnson, proposing a mandatory 5-year work in Nigeria by Nigerian doctors before being given a full practicing license. The bill had passed the second reading in the House of Representatives. The Nigerian doctors to patient ratio stands at 1 doctor to 5,000 patients, which is far beyond the World Health Organization's recommended ratio of 1 doctor to 600 patients. Dr. Ojima, while explaining why doctors are leaving the country in droves, said the ratio in rural areas and conflict zones is far worse. He also complained about insecurity in the land, arguing that doctors were being targeted by criminals. Also, the enemy president said there was no equipment for doctors to work with in most hospitals in Nigeria.
All right, and moving on, the researchers of Qatar University have recently found that shisha smoking or water pipe smoking increases the risk of heart disease in adults. Shisha, also known as hookah, is a kind of water pipe used for smoking flavored tobacco. It originated in the Middle East and has become a social activity across the region. The study was led by Susu Zugair, an associate professor of basic medical sciences at Qatar University's College of Medicine. It analyzed data from over 1,000 adult participants living in Qatar, according to a statement released by Qatar University on Thursday. The researchers found that shisha smokers had 1.65 times higher odds of reporting a diagnosis of cardiovascular disease compared to non-smokers. Furthermore, the study highlighted that starting shisha smoking at a younger age was associated with a higher risk of developing heart diseases. It made a significant contribution to the understanding of the health consequences of shisha smoking, highlighting the need to address the public health concern in Qatar and other countries. And with this, we wrap up highlights at this hour.
So, what's enough for the highlights? I think the three headlines are quite interesting.
Yeah, really interesting.
There's the issue of shisha smoking and also the issue of Ghana approving malaria vaccines for children.
The only question that came to my head was, where is Nigeria in all of this?
Well, that's a good question, but then again, you should also consider the efficacy of this vaccine.
Of the vaccine as well.
So maybe Nigeria is trying to do its own due diligence to ensure, first of all, it's really sad, despite the decades of the malaria surge in Africa. It's really sad to see that it is still as dangerous as it used to be.
Yes, definitely.
And one really has to be thankful for the plethora of drugs that are available, readily available at dispensaries, at pharmacies, in the hospitals, to treat malaria diseases as, you see symptoms.
You talked about how long it actually took to actually have even a vaccine, but then we have so many doctors, so many scientists in Africa, and we have resources in Africa. Why do we need to depend, on other countries?
That's a good question, and I think it's a question about strengthening our own research and scientific capacity.
We know where it hurts, so we should know, we should have the solution at hand.
Yes, because we're the most affected, so why do we have to wait for people outside of Africa to bring vaccines to us when we, the Africans, are the most affected by the malaria surge?
We have the resources. We have
and
forests.
We have the resources. And now to the shisha story.
Oh wow, very interesting one. Now these particular risks are not new, even to the shisha smokers. We've heard about it. It's been sounded as a warning over and over and over again. But what can you say? It's a vice that a lot of people seem to enjoy, and there's a saying that what you do when you're young, the consequences actually come out when you're older, and this is what they're talking about. If you start at a very young age, by the time you get a lot older, the risk of heart diseases, heart attack, heart failure, whatever it is, is very, very high. So
like you said, they're quite hard-headed, right? It's just like telling a smoker that you're liable to die young.
It's on the pack, right? It's on the advert.
But does it stop them?
It does stop them at all.
Or nothing to
and
stop.
they seem to think that smoking shisha is a lot healthier.
Yes,
than
of course. I poured water. I poured water.
And it's flavored.
But it's still tobacco and it's still nicotine at the end of the day.
And it's even higher than the usual cigarette. So.
I wouldn't
some of them
know that,
smoke for hours.
Yes, that's true. Oh yes, I think that's where this Hausa balance came.
Yeah.
That some people turn their mouths to silence us.
Are you serious? Exhaust.
That's a question. That's a conversation for another day. Well, let's move on to the packages that we have for you this morning. A 7-story building under construction has collapsed in the Banana Island, Ikoyi area of Lagos State. The cause of the cave-in is still unknown, as journalists have been prevented from entering the site of the disaster. Take a look.
The site of the 7-story building under construction is located in an exclusive area of Banana Island, Ikoyi, Lagos State. There are indications that the 7th-floor building was not approved by the Lagos State government. Medical personnel from the Nigerian Red Cross are on ground to rescue those who sustained injuries and have been treated. There is no record of loss of life. Amidst the confusion, the estate manager is preventing journalists from gaining access to the collapsed building.
I came to you in the morning.
You didn't say anything.
I told, that's a fucking lie.
You didn't say anything.
That's a very bad lie. I told you that the estate is calling a press conference on this, that the PRO will invite you at the right time.
Officials of the Lagos State government have come to inspect the site of the fallen building and are giving assurances that someone will be held responsible.
During this emergency response, we are able to rescue 7 people alive. Those people that were rescued were treated on the spot and discharged. It's only one that was taken to a private hospital where he's receiving adequate treatment. Yes. And if you can see that at the outer conduit, we've already reached what we call ground zero. We are moving to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th conduit, and believe me, we will get to ground zero in each of these conduit to ensure transparency, to ensure that nobody is left, to ensure that the job is being done professionally.
Realized that the building had come down. Our Lasambos were already on ground by the time I personally got here. They had treated about 7 to 8 minor injuries on getting to the scene, and a few of them that we felt needed to go to the hospital have been taken to the hospitals last night, and many of them had minor injuries, and that is as far as injuries is concerned. In terms of fatalities, which you've asked, as of this moment, we have not recorded any fatalities as of this moment. We're here, our equipment are here. What we're trying to do now is to see how we can go through the rubbles very quickly to see if, and indeed, there are any fatalities that we can recover, as the case may be.
As journalists keep watch on the fringes of the disaster site, rescue operations by LASEMA and NEMA and the Lagos State Building Control Agency, LASBCA, continue in the estate.
The leadership conundrum in Africa tells a story of a continent that has remained behind, especially in terms of development and industrial capacity. However, today, some youths believe that finding the right leader will push Nigeria to attain the potential it has struggled to attain in the past 63 years. The report.
There are so many factors that have kept African states and their leadership essentially underperforming since the African Year of Independence in 1960. Apart from the initial decade of idealistic pro-African nationalism, leadership on the continent has now been subsumed by corruption, sit-tight administrations, and a discouraging lack of ideology. Despite the very few examples of pristine leadership on the continent, some youth believe that Nigeria can produce a leader that fits the ideal model, especially at this time of his political evolution.
Shiwaju is a man that every youth, every woman, be from irrespective of the culture where you are, can look up to, because he has shown that he's not a biased man. He does not look at ethnicity or this. Look at even this man that is becoming president. He said his appointment will be based on competence, not based on because I'm a Yoruba man or because I'm from the north or because you voted more for me. It's going to be based on competence, because he felt, to his belief, he felt what matters is leadership. And once we can get the leadership right in our country, Nigerian, we appreciate the government of the day.
Different of tribe in Nigeria, whereby if you can look at yourself when you've been traveling out, going one place, the moment you can manage those people up there, that's the way you can manage your people in Nigeria. It's very simple.
Nigeria at this time needs a person that can reconnect with the people and provide a selfless leadership that can balance age, gender, ethnicity, and religion.
As a leader, like you said, I believe in inclusive governance. There's no how you can isolate the youth from governance because they are stakeholders to development, both social, economic, political. You need to bring the youth. You need to hear their views. They need to hear their views.
President-elect is not selective. He is there and he is there for all everybody. Not because you are Igbo or you are from here or you are from there. So he's there for everybody. So he's not selective. He's a man of the people and he's a man that took everybody as one.
With the roller coaster of emotions that have followed the 2023 elections and all parties in court, the consensus is for citizens, especially youth, to tone down the confrontational language being used at present that could destabilize the country. While the inflamed tempers come with the electoral process, it is time to look beyond elections and engage the incoming government in order to revive the nation's economic infrastructure.
All right. Carpentry and furniture production has over the years provided job opportunities to many youths in Nigeria's commercial city of Kano. However, the lack of capital and high cost of raw materials are thinning the ranks of those engaged in a once lucrative industry. In this special report, Trust TV correspondent Idris Jibrin examines how furniture makers are struggling to remain in business.
Ibrahim Sani is a local carpenter who owns a small furniture production workshop in Kano. He usually buy, sell and repair broken furnitures, and in most cases he builds the new ones for his customers. Ibrahim says this handwork means everything to his life. From my primary to university education, all was sponsored with this business that I am doing, this furniture making that I am doing. And right now, as I'm talking to you, there are almost 20 people who are under me. And out of these 20 people, 10 of them are married. With over 20 young men under his command, Ibrahim is able to keep body and soul together, including teaching these young men how to become professional carpenters and furniture makers. I've started doing this business 7 years ago, and we thank God the trade is doing everything to us. I'm going to school and I'm using the money I'm getting here to sponsor my education. We thank Almighty Allah for this trade. Right now, as I'm talking to you, I have one wife and 14 children. And I am taking care of them with this particular trade that you are seeing. So the business means everything to us. Unfortunately, the business seems to be in crisis these days, courtesy of largely the lack of capital for these young men to sustain the trade. Raw materials too seems to be too expensive for carpenters like Ibrahim to afford. The major problem we are facing is the high cost of raw materials. One, because we carpenters and furniture makers, we don't have tangible union that will help us regulate our own activities. That is why today you go to the market to buy raw materials, you hear the price is different. When you go back tomorrow, again you will hear the price has increased. Kano may seems to be a place where all kinds of furnitures are built, but carpenters express growing concern over government inability to intervene in their business over the years. Idris Jibrin, Trust TV News, Kano.
And that's it for packages this morning. We'll now go on a short break, and when we return, we'll be serving you what's on the front pages of national dailies this morning. Stay with us.
Now, as part of efforts to support Africa's goal of strengthening...
Now, looking at the activity chart, as you can see right here, a total volume of 130...
Inherited a Boko Haram crisis that at that time was restricted to Yobe.
How secure are they? You can see security men with blood.
This is the road leading up to the...
Or really, if you look at English squad, you are looking at EPL, you are looking at their names. You are not looking at...
tribal or regionalism.
Where you find that they look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regionalism.
I have said that.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. It's still Daybreak on Trust TV. Now let's take a look at the dailies and what the papers this morning are saying. We'll begin with Daily Trust newspaper, and at the top of the page you can already see that campaigns for Senate presidency has already started, and lead story here talks about 98 Chibok schoolgirls still in captivity 9 years after. We have writers that say freed girls decry stigmatization. We never stopped praying for return of our daughters, says principal. I won't give up till my last day in office, says Buhari. All missing girls must be rescued, says Amnesty International. And details of the story can be found on page 4. You'd see a pictorial of a Chibok woman demanding for the release of their daughters from Boko Haram, and also inserts of former First Lady of the United States of America, Michelle Obama, with a placard saying hashtag bring back our girls, and that was from years ago. Now moving on, a runoff polls. 36,935 voters to decide Fintiri Binani's fate in Adamawa. Federal government spent 13 trillion naira on subsidies in 16 years. Thieves stole 16 trillion naira oil, says Nati. Buhari performs Umrah amid tight security in Mecca. And these are some of the stories on Daily Trust newspaper.
For the Nation newspaper this morning, from the very top, we see Time lists Tinubu among 100 most influential. And beside that, we see nobody trapped on the Lagos building, collapsed Lagos building. We also see Nati, government spent 13 trillion naira on petrol subsidy in 6 years. Quite a lot. If you want to read more on that story, you could check page 5 of the Nation newspaper. And below the masthead, we see NSIA grew net assets to 1.02 trillion in 2022. TET fund okays 30 billion for projects. And for the very glaring headline, Tinubu to tribunal. Petitions by Atiku PDP not competent. Not joining Obi, Kwankwaso invalidates suit. Voters in FCT not superior. And also we see on the belt, PSC probes cash for promotion allegation. And also 7 burnt to death for Ogere crash. And that's it for the front page of the Nation newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. The lead story here talks about supplementary elections. PDP battle for 2 governors, 94 legislative seats. We have writers that says Atiku mobilizes support for PDP candidates. APC backs Binani in upstage Fintiri. IGLA's fears of voter intimidation, deploys personnel in 2,660 polling units. We have a pictorial there of the president performing Lesser Hajj, urging Muslims to be self-reliant. From the top of the page, Tinubu Don make Time magazine 100 most influential persons. CBN to mop up dormant account balances, unclaimed funds. Fuel subsidy and oil theft gulp 29 trillion naira, says federal government. And below the page there, Obi Kwankwaso shared Atiku's votes, Tinubu tells tribunal. On building collapse, LASG stops construction projects in Banana Island. And the House leadership reps elect form 283-member alliance. These are some of the stories on Punch newspaper.
And the Guardian newspaper leads with a story on the race to the Senate presidency. Kalu Akpabio lead as South jostles for Lawan's seat. underneath that, and besides the pictorial, we see CBN takes custody of dormant funds from banks. Accountability concerns trail yearly 63.46 million barrels oil swap due. And underneath that, we see aviation workers threaten 2-day warning strike over COS welfare. And we see another one. Drama continues as Obi denies British government apology over detention. Catch that story on page 6 as it's been developing quite a lot of controversy in the last few days. And we see the pictorial which says beaches for the rich, from solving chronic erosion to privatizing beaches. That's a big story on The Guardian, and you can find that on page 4 and 5. That's it for The Guardian this morning.
All right, let's take a look at this day newspaper. From the top of the page there, federal government cedes exclusive custody of returned Benin artifacts to Oba of Benin. Decision ends tussle between monarch Edo governor. We also have with 2.8% growth prediction, World Bank urges Nigeria to ease trade barriers. We also have below the masthead there, Tinubu, Biden, El Anetsui, King Charles make Time 100 Most Influential People 2023. Ahead of rerun polls, IG deploys personnel, logistics in 24 states. Atiku drums support for Adamawa Governor, Fintiri Party, APC, PDP supporters demand credible polls in Adamawa. The lead story here says that Tinubu talks about Tinubu saying Atiku PDP's petitions gross abuse of judicial process, says ex-VP's candidacy balkanized, affected his party's fortunes, dismisses him as a serial loser, recalls him his many electoral losses. Atiku's aid on $460,000 forfeiture, you can't outrun your past. And these are some of the stories on this day newspaper.
And for the News Direct newspaper this morning, we start from the very top. APC rep candidate asks Osun Tribunal to sack Ajile Soro of PDP. Also, energy theft report illegal electricity consumers. EKE-DC urges customers. Also, Dangote Cement pledges higher returns, value to shareholders, approve 340.8 billion naira dividend. And for the leading story, World Bank lists anti-growth policies frustrating Nigeria's economy, highlights insecurity, dependency on oil, others, lowers GDP projection growth to 2.8%. And we see the pictorial of directors of Dangote Cement Group at its 14th general meeting of the Dangote Cement PLC held in Lagos yesterday. And underneath that, we see tribunal contest. Tinubu objects to petition for runoff election, says Atiku is a serial loser. And finally, you could catch Femi Additional's column at the back page of the News Direct newspaper. And that's it for the News Direct.
All right, on Leadership Friday, we have the lead story here. Federal government puts states on red alert over impending floods. It will likely be worse than 2022. We also have a rider that says 80% of 774 local government areas to be affected. Stakeholders engaged to mitigate risks. We really hope something is done about this quickly. And then at the top of the page there, Ghana becomes first country to approve Oxford malaria vaccine. British Commission declines comment on Obi's detention by UK immigration. And we also have Commission probes alleged $10,000 bribe for promotion in police. We also have APC holds governorship primaries in Bayelsa, Kogi, Imo today. And these are some of the stories on Leadership Friday.
And we go to First News. Besides the masthead, we see Banana Island building collapse. Sanwo-Olu orders probe as Lasema rescues 25. Below that, Kogi Guba Yahya Bello Sean's deputy unveils preferred successor. as Onoja pulls out of the race. Quite interesting. We also see I have no anointed candidate for speaker. That's according to the current speaker, Femi Gbajabiamila. Also, Adamawa rerun 36.935 voters to determine Fintiri Binani's fate. And for the major headline, Time lists Tinubu amongst 2023 100 most influential people. Says his electoral victory not an easy feat in Africa's most populous country. Describes his campaign slogan, Emilo Kon, as a nod to his role as a long-time political power broker. Acknowledges Tinubu's role in restoring democracy in Nigeria in 1999 after fighting military, serving as Lagos governor for 8 years. And also, 2023 presidential poll. Biafra agitator Ekpa writes UN declares Obi winner. And these are some of the stories on First News. We'll now take a short breather, and when we return, we'll be serving you more on the analysis. Stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that. Where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on Daybreak this beautiful Friday morning. And right now, we're done reeling out the headlines from the front pages of the national dailies. It's time for us to analyze some of these stories, and we have in the studio with us our constant Friday guests. Talking about Nuruddin Abdullah, and he's the editor of 21st Century Chronicles. Very, very constant guest. Good
Indeed.
Morning, and thank you for joining us. All right, so let's begin with the glaring headline on Daily Trust newspaper, talking about 98 Chibok schoolgirls still in captivity 9 years after. And then we have so many writers, but the one that actually picked my interest is the one where the president said he will not give up until his last day in office. So far we've seen some of the girls rescued, some of the girls escaped, some of the girls found, but we still have 98 of them still in captivity. Can anything be done before the president leaves office?
Very unlikely, because the president has less than 50 days to go, having spent 7 years, 10 months in office. And why is this significant? Because the APC government came into power on the back of the Chibok Girls campaign. You remember the Bring Back Our Girls campaign here in Abuja? It's one of the Chibok Girls incident was one of the major factors responsible for the defeat of the then ruling party, the PDP. The way the Jonathan administration handled the issue and the way it sparked out of control with the international community. I could remember the U.S. Senator, John McCain. You remember, he was speaking at the Congress. He said, no, we have to, he was saying something that there was no government in Abuja. And, they will just rescue the artificial. You remember one of the pictures of the United States President, then First Lady, Michelle Obama. But it's unfortunate that 8 years after this government came, with the hope of ending the security challenges, particularly school children abduction from their dormitories, the issue exacerbated after Chibok in 2014 that this government promised to rescue immediately when they came into power. We had Dapchi in Yobe. We moved to Kankara in Katsina, down to Kagara in Niger. We still remember the Greenfield in Kaduna, the Bethel up to now. I think some of them are still there.
Yes.
So the thing became rampant. Chibok was the major one that we had, or rather the maiden one we had. But when Buhari came with this mantra of ending insecurity, as a retired general, you know, the issue spiked. Apart from Chibok, there are some Bethel Baptist students still in captivity.
Of course.
I don't know that of Greenfield. We had not once, not twice, not thrice in Niger State. You understand? So it's unfortunate that nearly 100 of these Chibok girls are still with the terrorists. Yeah, let's accept the fact that the government tried major ways in degrading the offensive capabilities of the Boko Haram terrorists. Maybe largely because of the death of Shekau, which was courtesy of the infighting between the ISWAP and the traditional Boko Haram terrorists and what have you. But I thought maybe the government must have upped its ante by keying into this apparent fraction between the two terrorist factions by rescuing these girls. But maybe another thing that we have to put into consideration is this. Most of the 9 years now, majority of them may be virgins, young schoolgirls. We saw how some of them were brought back, some rescued, some escaped with babies. And you can see that trauma.
Indeed.
You understand. And some of them were so terrified, traumatized, converted into the terrorist ideologies that they don't even want to come back. I remember a particular incident of a girl. She came with pregnancy. She was impregnated by a terrorist. Her parent apparently rejected her. She became a subject of scorn in the community. I remember when she gave birth, she said that she was suspicious of the manner her son died. She loved her son, which she got from a terrorist. But her mother, her grandpa, everybody in the community was against him. The boy just suddenly died. And I saw her interview. She was saying that everybody was happy. Everybody was happy. Minus her. So, you know, that is the challenges. You know, it's an issue with multifaceted aspects. Maybe the federal government should have done more than enough. But after spending 7 years, 10 months in office, you are saying the president is not even here.
Isn't this an indictment now, looking at the fact that the president said he would not rest until his last day in office? But we've not seen that sort of commitment, at least one would say, because you mentioned quite a number of incidences, the Greenfield, Bethel Baptist, Birnin Yauri, and then there's also the Kankara issue, Dapchi. And okay, Dapchi didn't happen during Buhari's tenure, of course. Now I'm talking about those peculiar to his administration. In all of this, just recently in Zamfara State, even though they were not school children, but they were children as well, 85 people were abducted. Isn't this an indictment to his administration and the government generally, that they are not putting in as much effort as they should be, as much as they would say that they have dissipated, you know, the whims of this terrorists per se?
Yeah, that is it. And Dapchi happened, the first one that happened under Buhari's administration. Chiba was the one that happened under Jonathan's. Yes, if you take the UNICEF data, you know, more school and girls child we are pulled out of schools.
Indeed.
Because of these rampant attacks. You can count the number that happened in Katsina, in Zamfara, in Sokoto, in Niger. Take the Birnin Yauri, a federal government facilitated. Some were even married up. I think until recently there are some private individuals who are even raising funds. Nobody cares. Talking about Chibok, apart from the anniversary, when last did you hear any government official talking about Chibok?
Almost as if they've been forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
So that explains the fact that what the president said, he will do everything possible. His officials have to be reminded, okay, Chibok girls anniversary will be tomorrow. Then the last 50 days in office and whatever. It's unfortunate that he came under the cradle of this Chibok girls activism. But unfortunately, instead of making the Chibok incident the first and the last, rather, what did we have? We had more than 20 major incidents, and majority of them still in captivity. Take the Birni Yauri incident, a federal government college. So it's most unfortunate. We hope that maybe the new administration will put an end to, will close the chapter. If they are dead, let their parents know. Because it's easier to think that your son, daughter in particular is dead than to be under the custody of one terrorist in the forest. You understand? If she is dead, she is dead. You can't, we are Muslim, we are religious people. Whether Muslims or Christians, you can take solace, everybody will die. But to imagine that a young girl taken away from her dormitory and now living with a terrorist,
They don't even have access.
you know, it's unimaginable, the trauma.
So a follow-up. Now, the Archbishop of the Francis Xavier Church in Ondo State, Archbishop Jude Arugundade, in his Easter message to Nigeria, because the church was opened on Easter Day for the first time after, I think, 10 to 11 months following the attack and massacre of 40 worshippers. He mentioned that Nigeria and its government has a bad habit of moving on too quickly from attacks and quickly forgetting the aftermath of such. Do you subscribe to that belief as well?
Yeah, of course, yes, of course. That's what the government wants. And you know, they're even blaming the media. But it is the way the country is structured. Take, for instance, who is talking about Accountant General of the Federation?
Indeed.
That stole those billions.
Indeed.
We have moved on. That's the reality. And that's what the government wants. Like the Chibok issue. It is only during the anniversary. Then when they are called, okay, you need maybe the media X, I want to see. You remember, she's late now, the then Women Affairs Minister, when she was engaging with the parents of these Chibok girls. You know, she openly told them that you should take solace and what if you. But she was reminded, you contested as a governor in your Taraba state. You lost. You went to tribunal. Not enough. You went to Court of Appeal. You are even moving to Supreme Court. Why didn't you leave it in the hands of God? Imagine if your daughter, and you know, we see the government officials with their families, you know, the people that, the security that's supposed to protect these school children. We have more than 20 million school children out of school. When this administration came, they were less than 9 million. They upgraded it to 20 million now, 8 years after. Look at them.
Okay.
They don't even ply the roads.
Well, let's move on to more stories. They're still on the front page of Daily Trust. I want you to share your thoughts on the supplementary elections, you know, about to happen, especially the governorship election in Kebbi and Adamawa State.
I don't think it will make any difference, barring any last minute. Nigeria is a country of surprises. Looking at the current official data, what the PDP governor, you know, the difference in Adamawa is about 31,000, and registered voters for tomorrow's election are 36,000. So you can see, I don't know, anything can happen, but apparently you know where it is going. Same thing in Kebbi. The APC guy is leading with a wide margin. When you compare it with the registered voters that are going to vote tomorrow, you'll apparently see where the pendulum will swing. But there are about over 90 legislative seats. House of Assembly, House of Reps, and what have you. But I think maybe with voter apathy, maybe you'll have, the general election, we have less than 30% turnout. Traditionally, rerun or supplementary election, you have less than half of the general voter turnout, maybe 10%, 15% turnout. In Kano, yeah, it will be very serious in Kano in some areas because there is, if you look at the Dogua, Tudungwada federal constituency, where the current House of Reps majority leader is leading, you see. So the parties are up and using all the available both legal and illegal means to ensure that.
Okay, so Nuruddin, my apologies to bring you back. I understand you were actively part of the negotiation process. You would correct me, I may be wrong. I'm talking about during the Chibok incident. So I want to ask this question. How would you rate, say, the government's approach towards the whole issue? Now, talking about negotiating with these said actors, and also, on the other hand, rehabilitating said actors if they put down arms at the detriment of some of those who are still living the horrors of the experiences, during and post attacks.
So maybe to start, I was never part of any negotiation process.
I may be wrong.
But all over the world, there is international standards that people who take up arms against government, when they are defeated, or when they are surrender voluntarily, they are co-opted back into society. But in terms of now we're talking about terrorism.
Yes.
About terrorism. Yes, they are defeated and they are surrendering in mass. And don't forget, it is not a political agitation that led to the taking over of the arms. It's a warped religious indoctrination. You ask them, what actually do they want? Nobody will tell you. If you look at all the preachments of the former Boko Haram leader, Bakr Sheikh, and what have you. So therefore, nothing wrong in rehabilitating reformed terrorists. But all over the world, there is benchmarks. Those with blows in their hands are tried according to the laws. That's the standard. Bomb makers, combat terrorists. There are those, like their family members, for instance. Some were forcibly taken from their communities and villages and converted into the wives of the terrorists. Unless they actively participated in combat operations that led to the mass slaughter of civilians, those can be excused, rehabilitated, and returned to the society. But those with the military know, if they are passed now, they know if you ever carry a gun or what if you, there is a exactly. And the intelligence community, they know. They know who was a bomb maker, they know operational or whatever, because they have their people. Those who are involved in mass slaughter of civilians must be prosecuted according to the law. They cannot just, okay, take for instance now, if Sheikh, for instance, has reformed and repented, then he will be brought back to Maiduguri? No, you should follow the law. What did the law say? So that is what they should do. And unfortunately, again, the federal government is not doing enough. Yeah, Borno State government is doing. Building and destroy facilities, talking about schools, health facilities, even shelter, and returning those IDPs to it. But the federal government is not. Yeah, there is hundreds of those reformed terrorists in particularly Geo barracks. But talk to the military people. So that these people, you remember there was an incident the military denied at that time? Was it on the way of the slaughtering of animals, sacrificial animals for them? There was almost violent protest, almost disarming soldiers and what have you. So it means that that horror, that ideology is still there. That bloodthirsty ideology is still there. So we have to go a long way in separating those involved in mass slaughter of civilians and those who found themselves there, or those with lesser crimes. Some certainly have to face the firing squad. Some may be live imprisonment. Some 10, 20 years. Some can even be freed, because maybe particularly the women or their children, their younger children and what have you. So that is it. But you know, just saying that a general was saying that a reformed Boko Haram can be president of Nigeria, that is ridiculous. It's an insult. Particularly of the hundreds or thousands of Nigerians whose loved ones, family members, neighbors and friends, we are mass slaughtered by this terrorist element. So I think that's my take.
Well, sadly, we've actually come to the end of this segment. Thank you so much, Nuruddin Abdullah, for joining us again this morning. All right, with this, we'll take a quick breather, and when we come back at the top of the hour, the show continues.
But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
That's great.
documenting the Nigerian story.
All right, good morning, and thank you for joining us on a Daybreak. Well, the show actually started, but thank you so much for staying with us. If you've been here with us since 7 a.m., the show continues. I'm Dashan Husseina Usman.
And I'm Sagir Ibrahim. Thank you for staying. It's the top of the hour, and we'll continue to serve you what we have for you this morning. I'm Sagir Ibrahim, and let's start once again with the headlines. Hush Puppies associate Woodbury pleads guilty, forfeits $8 million assets.
CBN Forex ban, Nigerians imported 18 trillion naira cooking oil meets others in 7 years.
Also, gunmen raid Rivers community, kill 3, abduct 2.
All right, let's take a look at the highlights, the details of the highlights. Olalekan Jacob Bonle, known as Mr. Woodbury, has pleaded guilty to wire fraud. He also agreed to forfeit $8 million in proceeds of wire fraud, as well as luxury cars and watches to the foreign government. Woodbury, a known associate of the now imprisoned internet fraudster Ramon Abbas, better known as Hush Puppy, recently in a plea declaration submitted at the United States District Court of the Northern District of Illinois, Eastern Division, on April 6th, pleaded guilty to count 1 of the indictments the People's Gazette reports. According to his plea agreement, he is required to pay back the sum of $8 million he fraudulently received from the 7 companies that he scammed. Other items seized are 4 Rolex watches, 1 Patek Philippe watch, 3 Audemars Piguet watches, 3 gold and diamond studded earrings, and 6 gold neck chains. Last year, he forfeited 151.8 Bitcoin to American government. On June 10, 2020, Woodbury was arrested in Dubai alongside Ramon Hush Puppy Abbas, who is currently serving an 11-year sentence for the similar fraud charge. Prior to his arrest, Woodbury was known for rocking and flaunting expensive designer wares and showing off his illicit wealth to his massive Instagram followers, the majority of whom had no idea his luxury lifestyle was funded by cybercrime.
Away from Woodbury, Nigerians imported not less than 9 items worth 18.12 trillion naira from the forex ban list of the Central Bank of Nigeria between 2016 and 2022. Findings by The Punch has shown. The CBN had categorized about 41 import items as not valid for Forex, which means that the importer will not be able to get Forex from the Apex Bank for such items. The Apex Bank said the restriction was part of efforts to sustain the stability of the foreign exchange market, ensure effective utilization of foreign exchange, and the derivation of optimum benefit from goods and services imported into the country. However, these items were not banned or prohibited by the Nigerian Customs Service, so they can still be imported. According to an analysis of Nigerian foreign trade reports of the National Bureau of Statistics from 2016 to 2022, items such as crude palm oil, vegetable products, animal products, meat, vegetable fats and oil, steel products, rubber, plastic, clothes and textiles were imported from various countries. The data obtained from the NBS in 2018 alone says 607.4 billion naira was spent on rubber and plastic imports, while 166.24 billion naira was spent on textile imports. The breakdown of the data revealed that in 2019, the sum of 536.77 billion naira was spent on importing rubber and plastic, while the sum of 174.97 billion was spent on importing textile within the same year. In 2020, a total of 1.46 trillion naira was spent on importing rubber and plastics, which is 25.6 billion naira more than the amount spent in 2021. Meanwhile, 416.71 billion naira was spent on textile imports in the same year.
All right, and finally, fewer than 3 persons were killed while 2 were abducted when gunmen suspected to be cultists invaded the Ubeta community of Ahoda West local government area of Rivers State. The gunmen ransacked the community on Wednesday morning in what appeared to be a reprisal, killing 3, while the day before the same group stormed the area and killed 2 shop owners. Paramount ruler of the Ubeta community, Chief Million Jonathan, confirmed the incident to newsmen in a telephone chat on Thursday afternoon. He gave the name of the kidnapped shop owner as Chimezie Nagbo, even as he expressed worry over their health and safety, especially as the hoodlums had yet to contact any of their families 3 days after they were taken. The monarch said the attacks had been recurring in the community without any concerted efforts by the government or security operatives to contain them. He said the situation has made many residents desert the place. Asked if he had reported the matter to the police, the monarch said he directed the chairman Community Development Committee, who was in Port Harcourt at the time, to do so. When contacted, the spokesperson for the State Police Command, Grace Iringe Koko, a superintendent of police, said no official report has been made to the police on the incident. And with that, we wrap up highlights at this hour.
Let's now take packages this morning. A 7-story building under construction has collapsed in the Banana Island area of Ikoyi in Lagos State. The cause of the cave-in is still unknown, as journalists have been prevented from accessing the premises. Take a look.
The site of the 7-story building under construction is located in an exclusive area of Banana Island, Ikoyi, Lagos State. There are indications that the 7th-floor building was not approved by the Lagos State government. Medical personnel from the Nigerian Red Cross are on ground to rescue those who sustained injuries and have been treated. There is no record of loss of life. Amidst the confusion, the estate manager is preventing journalists from gaining access to the collapsed building.
I came to you in the morning. You didn't say anything. I told, that's a fucking lie. You didn't say anything. That's a very bad lie. I told you that the estate is calling a press conference on this, that the PRO will invite you at the right time.
Officials of the Lagos State government have come to inspect the site of the fallen building and are giving assurances that someone will be held responsible.
During this emergency response, we are able to rescue 7 people alive. Those people that were rescued were treated on the spot and discharged. It is only one that was taken to a private hospital where he's receiving adequate treatment. Yes. And if you can see that at the outer conduit, we've already reached what we call ground zero. We are moving to the second, third, fourth conduit, and believe me, we will get to ground zero in each of these conduit to ensure transparency, to ensure that nobody is left, to ensure that the job is being done professionally.
Realized that the building had come down. Our Lasambos were already on ground by the time I personally got here. They had treated about 7 to 8 minor injuries on getting to the scene, and a few of them that we felt needed to go to the hospital have been taken to the hospitals last night, and many of them had minor injuries, and that is as far as injuries is concerned. In terms of fatalities, which you asked, as of this moment, we have not recorded any fatalities as of this moment. We're here, our equipment are here. What we're trying to do now is to see how we can go through the rubbles very quickly to see if, and indeed, there are any fatalities that we can recover as the case may be.
As journalists keep watch on the fringes of the disaster site, rescue operations by LASEMA and NEMA and the Lagos State Building Control Agency, LASBCA, continue in the estate.
Somebody was actually showing, I think, you actually showed me a video.
How did you have to call my name? Yeah, I just said
yes,
somebody.
you showed me a video of, how the building actually collapsed, and it was really, really scary.
Yes.
But to even know that, how were people? How did they know the building was going to cave in before they started recording?
So I think that's where coincidence comes to play. But then again, the bigger question is, how much more of this is going to happen before we start seeing governments take, action and carry out structural integrity tests on this building?
We've seen a lot of this actually happen last year.
And it's literally barely the beginning of the year. We're just entering or getting into a new quarter of the year, and it's happening already. And I read somewhere yesterday, I can't remember where particularly, that the building was not approved for construction.
Can you imagine?
I don't know how true that is.
Wow.
And perhaps that's the reason why we saw such resistance from, the estate officers there on site, preventing journalists from assessing the building. But for it to have happened in the Banana Island area of Lagos just shows you how, it's how unsafe it is generally. It used to happen around probably some parts of the suburbs in the mainland, and one would say, okay, maybe those parts there aren't much, they didn't do their due diligence pertaining to the test of this building, test of the materials used to construct these buildings and the likes of that. But to see it happen in the Banana Island area, where it's supposed to be the highbrow and where it's supposed to have the highest of quality put in to ensure the best comes out, it just makes you question the whole staying in Lagos thing. I, for one, have always said
I don't even imagine what would have happened if they'd already completed the building and people were actually working or living in that particular building.
Thankfully, they said that no life was lost, although of course there were a few casualties who sustained various degrees of injuries. But then it still alludes to the fact that I have never liked Lagos. No offense to people who stay in Lagos. I know this is more or less stray bullets hitting them, but I have never liked Lagos, and I do not want to stay in Lagos. I'm on record, so I'm just putting this out there again.
All right, well, let's move on to more of the packages. Now, the leadership conundrum in Africa tells the story of a continent that has remained behind, especially in terms of development and industrial capacity. Now, however, today, some youths believe that finding the right leader will push Nigeria to attain the potential it has struggled to attain in the past 63 years. The report.
There are so many factors that have kept African states and their leadership essentially underperforming since the African Year of Independence in 1960. Apart from the initial decade of idealistic pro-African nationalism, Leadership on the continent has now been subsumed by corruption, sit-tight administrations, and a discouraging lack of ideology. Despite the very few examples of pristine leadership on the continent, some youth believe that Nigeria can produce a leader that fits the ideal model, especially at this time of his political evolution.
Shiwaju is a man that every youth, every woman, be from irrespective of the culture where you are, can look up to, because he has shown that he's not a biased man. He does not look at ethnicity or this. Look at even this man that is becoming president. He said his appointment will be based on competence, not based on because I'm a Yoruba man or because I'm from the north or because you voted more for me. It's going to be based on competence, because he felt, to his belief, he felt what matters is leadership. And once we can get the leadership right in our country, Nigerian, we appreciate the government of the day.
Different of tribe in Nigeria, whereby if you can look at yourself when you've been traveling out, going one place, the moment you can manage those people up there, that's the way you can manage your people in Nigeria. It's very simple.
Nigeria at this time needs a person that can reconnect with the people and provide a selfless leadership that can balance age, gender, ethnicity, and religion.
As a leader, like you said, I believe in inclusive governance. There's no how you can isolate the youth from governance, because they are stakeholders to development, both social, economic, political. You need to bring the youth. You need to hear their views. They need to hear their views.
President-elect is not selective. He is there, and he is there for all everybody. Not because you are Igbo or you are from here or you are from there. So he's there for everybody. So he's not selective. He's a man of the people, and he's a man that took everybody as one.
With the roller coaster of emotions that have followed the 2023 elections and all parties in court, the consensus is for citizens, especially youth, to tone down the confrontational language being used at present that could destabilize the country. While the inflamed tempers come with the electoral process, it is time to look beyond elections and engage the incoming government in order to revive the nation's economic infrastructure.
Okay, carpentry and furniture production has over the years provided job opportunities to many youths in Nigeria's commercial city of Kano. However, the lack of capital and high cost of raw materials are thinning the ranks of those engaged in the once lucrative industry. In this special report, Trust TV's correspondent Idris Jibrin examines how furniture makers are struggling to remain in business. Take a look.
Ibrahim Sani is a local carpenter who owns a small furniture production workshop in Kano. He usually buy, sell and repair broken furnitures, and in most cases he builds the new ones for his customers. Ibrahim says this handwork means everything to his life. From my primary to university education, all was sponsored with this business that I am doing, this furniture making that I am doing. And right now, as I'm talking to you, there are almost 20 people who are under me. And out of these 20 people, 10 of them are married. With over 20 young men under his command, Ibrahim is able to keep body and soul together, including teaching these young men how to become professional carpenters and furniture makers. I've started doing this business 7 years ago, and we thank God the trade is doing everything to us. I'm going to school and I'm using the money I'm getting here to sponsor my education. We thank Almighty Allah for this trade. Right now, as I'm talking to you, I have one wife and 14 children, and I am taking care of them with this particular trade that you are seeing. So the business means everything to us. Unfortunately, the business seems to be in crisis these days, courtesy of largely the lack of capital for these young men to sustain the trade. Raw materials too seems to be too expensive for carpenters like Ibrahim to afford. The major problem we are facing is the high cost of raw materials. One, because we carpenters and furniture makers, we don't have tangible union that will help us regulate our own activities. That is why today you go to the market to buy raw materials, you hear the price is different. When you go back tomorrow, again you will hear the price has increased. Kano may seems to be a place where all kind of furnitures are built, but carpenters express growing concern over government inability to intervene in their business over the years. Idris Jubrin, Trust TV News, Kano.
Well, the Independent National Electoral Commission has urged registered voters to come out en masse to exercise their franchise in Oyo State. Saturday's supplementary polls will hold in 8 affected polling units, which make up 2 federal constituencies in Oyo State. The fate of candidates who contested for seats in the nation's lower legislative chamber in Oluyole, as well as Ibadan Northeast and Southeast federal constituencies. Head of Department, Voter Education and Publicity, Rosemary Adeniyi, assured voters in Ibadan that the electoral umpire was fully prepared to address irregularities noticed in the last elections. INEC had cited the malfunctioning of biometric verification and accreditation system machine coupled with irregularities in these affected areas as basis for cancellation.
Altogether, we have 8 polling units only that the supplementary election will be taking place on Saturday. Please, everyone that is registered in those polling units should make sure that they go out to register. Please, we don't want to see anyone that is not registered in those polling units. No, if you know you are not registered in those polling units, you don't have any business there. We have the party agents that will be there, that will take care of whatever they want to take care of at the polling unit. But as we know all the activities concerning the election, all the things that we are supposed to know, that is that the election will start by 8:30 a.m. and end by 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. All materials.
Okay, now barely days to the May 29th inauguration of the incoming administration, Katsina residents want the federal and state government to face insecurity squarely. Civil society organization, women and other vulnerable groups in Katsina State are counting days to the end of incessant terrorist attacks that have devastated the socio-economic fabric of the society. Abdullahi Yamidi has more on the report.
The outgoing administrations of President Muhammadu Buhari and Governor Aminu Masari say they have done more than enough to end the incessant attacks, killings, kidnapping for ransom, and animals rustling. But despite the significant drop in terrorist attacks over the last few months, there are still pockets of attacks in some local government areas of the state.
We want to see more attention focused on improving the local security architecture so that they can function effectively in addressing the problem. The government should also ensure that there is a very good synergy between the local security architecture, especially the vigilante group, and the other security agencies like the police, army, civil defense, and the rest, so that they can work together.
This Katsina resident wants the incoming government of Dikorada to focus on addressing the main drivers of terrorism, such as poverty and drugs abuse.
We are hoping to see policies, programs that will address the issue of women, children, and the aged people.
Other respondents expect nothing short of an all-inclusive administration by the incoming governor, which will include people with special needs and other minority groups. They are confident that Dikorada, who has a vast experience in administration and governance, will put together relevant people to assist him in running the affairs of Katsina State.
we have this expectation that he is going to have another inclusive government where Katsina State indigenous will be part and parcel of the administration. And if all put together, more hands are put into the administration, it is easier for the governor to have a smooth running of administration.
We have office of SSA disabled to the governor for disabled matters by former Governor Masari, and currently we are seeking, we hope this new governor will take over and continue from where the governor stopped.
They also want the incoming governor to prioritize agriculture, health, education, small and medium enterprises, as well as local government autonomy in his first 100 days in office. Observers are optimistic that the Dikko administration will try to replicate the infrastructure and human capital development witnessed during the administrations of Umaru Yar'Adua and Ibrahim Shema. Abdullahi Ismail, Trust Television News, Katsina.
All right, with that, we'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll move on to our discussion. Stick around. All right, welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on Trust TV, and we're live in the Federal Capital Territory in case you're just joining us. Now let's move on to our first discussion of the day. Ahead of the supplementary elections scheduled for Saturday, An atmosphere of anxiety is pervading in some of the affected states, while some political groups have stepped up protests in some of the states. Others are calling for security deployment to avert any crisis. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission will on April 15th conduct supplementary elections in 2,660 polling units across 185 local government areas of 24 states. The Commission had conducted the presidential and National Assembly elections on February 25th and the governorship and state houses of assembly polls on March 18. The supplementary elections include the governorship, state houses of assembly senatorial, and House of Representatives elections in constituencies where they were previously suspended due to some reasons, including violence and situations where the margin between the winner and the first runner-up was less than the votes cancelled. Now, joining us via Zoom to discuss is Mr. Emmanuel Njoku, Director, Democracy and Governance Code. Good morning, Mr. Emmanuel, and thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. Good to see you guys. Good to see my guys.
Good to see you indeed. So, Mr. Emmanuel, I want to ask you, you've spoken so dispassionately about the conduct of the election as well as other issues around the election itself. So, Saturday is going to be the scheduled date for, the election. But one question that comes to mind is, I read somewhere this morning that INEC does not even know how many polling units is going to be conducting supplementary elections for in, say, Sokoto State. So how would you respond to the preparedness of INEC for this supplementary election itself?
Well, I believe that the data out there where it says that there will be two elections in 2,660 polling units, that is the data released by INEC. So I'll be surprised. People are saying INEC does not know the number of units where they'll be conducting elections. I believe that INEC will be ready. INEC is ready for this election. This is an INEC that conducted an election in 176,600 polling units on the February 25th and on the March 18th. So 2,660 polling units should be less than just about 1% or thereabout of the number of people that held the election. So why won't INEC be ready? I want to believe that INEC will also see this election as an opportunity to redeem her image and hopefully try to start building back trust that has been lost. So yes, I think INEC could be ready. But one other factor that I think that will play out that affect this election more is security and law, the role of law enforcement agencies in our elections. Because we've seen this kind of supplementary elections in the past, and usually the political actors get more desperate when they come to these elections. So we would expect law enforcement agencies to be on top of their game to provide security in all of this polling, not just providing security because of disruption, not just because of talks coming to disrupt the process, but particularly to prevent vote buying in this polling is where these elections should to hold tomorrow. So security personnel going to this place should be deployed to look out for vote buying, because in the past, when there's this kind of elections, typically you see politicians come with a lot of money, being desperate to either cancel the margin of lead or to get the necessary number of just votes that they need for them to win. I understand that in Adamawa State, the PDP the PDP just needs about 6,000 votes to be able to cancel out any possibility of APC winning in that election. So they will be desperate to see that this happens. But if it's at INEC, I believe and I trust that INEC is ready. I mean, one of the reasons why I believe so is INEC was preparing. INEC was already prepared from the appropriation and from their logistics planning. They were already prepared to have a runoff election. Assuming that the margin of lead of President-elect Tinubu was less than, if they did declare Tinubu the president-elect, INEC was already prepared to have a runoff. And that will still happen across the whole country and opponents across the country. So if INEC was prepared already to have a runoff election, Of course, they should be very prepared to conduct a perfect election in these 2,660 polling units across the country.
All right, Mr. Emmanuel. Well, I think we've heard that before, and history has actually taught us that a lot of times INEC has actually come out to say they're ready, and when the time comes, they're actually not fully prepared. And still back to what my colleague Sagir asked you, talking about some of the polling units, some states, INEC not even knowing the number of polling units in some states. Daily Trust actually carried the story of INEC yet to decide on polling units for Sokoto rerun, and you have stakeholders of political parties worried that the election might not even hold in the state in particular, but the INEC is still saying that they're ready. But do you think that, because the rerun is happening tomorrow, right? Do you think from now up until tomorrow is enough time for INEC to actually know where these polling units are and even, disperse some of the sensitive materials there?
Bearing in mind that, they are going to be conducting this supplementary election for the 3 senatorial districts and even 11 House of Representative seats in the state. So that's why I asked earlier, are we sure that INEC is as prepared as it is appearing to be? Because remember, on February 25, before February 25, we were told that, look, we are prepared. BVAS is going to be used and IREV is going to be used. We saw what happened on February 25. March 18, okay, we didn't have so much issues with regards to that, but we're having a supplementary election that is going to be quite sensitive. And of course, like you said, what the PDP needs to cement its victory is barely around 600 votes, making it a very, very dicey situation. So should we take INEC's word for it at this time?
Well, frankly, I will not hold brief for INEC. Sadly, we've not been seeing INEC spokespersons on TV like we used to see for the election. That's another issue of concern, because I will also believe that at this time, after the election that happened, the issues with the election, I would expect that an organization that is accountable to people and to the taxpayers should be even more seen more on TV, national TV, granting press releases and having media chats, giving Nigerians, explaining to Nigerians what happened and the flaws and the challenges they see in the elections. So for this election, I want to believe that, I know in Sokoto State, the election was conclusive in all the senatorial elections. And I mean, the limitations of this polling unit and the whole results that came in from this state. I mean, INEC is the custodian of this result. So if someone is saying that INEC does not know the actual polling units, that would be a shock. That is a shocker to me, because I mean, how would they not know? But we'll leave all of this till tomorrow, so I will see, because we can only say when they say they are prepared, like they've always said, and we can say with them benefit of doubt. But all of that will amount to nothing much till tomorrow, and we'll see how the election will pan out tomorrow.
All right, now, in the previous polls, a majority of the polls were actually declared, inconclusive, due to infractions, disruptions, and also overvoting. What factors do you actually think will shape this particular rerun elections, especially, the governorship elections in Adamawa and Kebbi State?
Well, for one is there will be low voter turnout, typically because that is what we usually see in the supplementary elections. Is what we call voter fatigue. Some voters who travel all the way to their communities to be able to cast their votes, spent money and had high expectations. And most of them are not happy with the turnout of events. Because I mean, the PDP are making their own allegations, while the APC is also making their own allegations of the other party trying to manipulate the process. So voter fatigue probably will be a factor in the voter turnout in this election. A lot of people may have moved on with their activities, may have gone back to their workplaces. A lot of young people who left their businesses or workplace to go back to vote may not have that opportunity or that leave to do that at this time. So yes, voter turnout will play out. And then this is going to be a very commercialized election as regards vote buying, like I've said before. We'll be expecting to observe and see the level of vote buying and the rate of vote buying in these places, because this is what we've seen in the past. We will also be anticipating to see, violence in the election, which is why I called out the security law enforcement agencies to provide security, because like you see the numbers, everybody knows their areas of strength. So in an election like this, with the history of political behavior, you will see politicians send talks and violence to the areas of their areas of strength of their political opponents, just to cancel out the possibility of votes they can get, and so they can get the number of votes they need in their own areas of strength and will be declared winner. But one thing is certain about this election and many elections that is to come. And before I say that, another thing that will impact on this election is the disappointment of many Nigerians who had high expectation as regards the quality of election that we were expecting. And you will agree with me that the February 5th election is not an election we should really reference as anything fair or credible, as it were. But many people also are disappointed how the election panned out. Many people also are disappointed that some of these elections that were declared inconclusive, they believe that it was not supposed to be declared inconclusive in the first place. They believe that they were supposed to have gone ahead to declare them winner. I mean, against all the whole context of this conversation. All of these things will play a major role in what will pan out in this election. Last thing I wanted to see is that at the end of this whole election, one thing is clear, that the court will be the decider of all of this process at the end of it, which is sad. Elections are supposed to be people come and vote and have their votes count and have, give mandate to citizens. But we are going to see a season where the judiciary will have to end up deciding who will be the leader of most of these elections across Nigeria. And I don't think this is a good development. It's going to clog the whole judicial process and the cases in the judiciary. It shouldn't be so. It is sad that we are here again. I mean, people like me, who probably have been an evangelist of voter participation and participation in governance, feel very sad and got almost depressed, because we felt that we are going to have an election completely different from the kind of elections we've seen in the past. But that never happened. Another thing I believe that play a major role in this election, every day I try to review the 2023 election, February 25th election, and March 18th election. I begin to ask myself, is INEC really independent? Because if you look, closely at how the appointment of regs happened and the role the resident electoral commissioners play in the states, and the role of the INEC commission, that's talk about the INEC chairman in Abuja and his national commissioners, and how much influence they have over the regs, you begin to wonder and ask yourself, is INEC really independent? I say this because in many cases, these resident electoral commissioners are appointed and nominated by the governors in their states and politicians in their states and at federal level. So you see, when you now come to an election, INEC chairman can sit in Abuja and come up with beautiful policies and guidelines and give directives. At the end of the day, the execution of all of these things is in the hands of the resident electoral commissioner, who most times who have zero experience around elections, who most times are not passionate about elections, who in most cases have never been to the field or have an idea of what conducting an election is, who have no business with elections, just apart from the fact that they are professors from the academia. These people play a major role in our elections. So most of these electoral commissions during elections, you find out that they are more loyal to the people who nominated them and put them in office. So they are more loyal to the cause and interests of the people who nominated them and the political parties that they seek to serve, than aligning with the guidelines and policies and the processes of INEC and the Electoral Act. I mean, sadly, we've seen situations where at the point of making returns and doing collations, you now begin to wonder, these collation officers, were they even trained? Do they even understand the guidelines and the electoral act? So if people make collections completely in variance with the electoral laws, you need to wonder, were they even trained? So these are the issues that will play out in these elections. I mean, the INEC can make as much policies they want to make in Abuja, but at the end of the day, these elections is left in the hands of the resident electoral commissioners, who are the chief executives at the state level, over the administrative secretaries of INEC, who supposedly have more experience, who have worked for years and decades as an INEC staff, who are few people who do elections. But when you now appoint a reg, the reg is over an experienced person giving directives and doing the election as he wishes or desires in variance to electoral laws. Then the returning officers are mostly professors from the academia who do not most times even understand the law as regards collation and all of this margin of lead. So when you look at a case study like the case of governorship election in Ogun State and in Kaduna State, where the parties that won this election won with just a margin less than 13,000. I think in Ogun it was 13 and in Kaduna 10,000 or so, or mix it the other, you can turn it the other way. I'm not too sure the numbers. You begin to wonder, how do you now make a return when there were lots of polling units where elections could not hold for issues of security, where there were lots of polling units where there was a lot of violence and elections was upturned? And if you look at the Electoral Act from section 24 sub 2 and 3, section 47 sub 3, section 51 sub 2, clearly stipulates why and how if elections doesn't hold in place because of insecurity, because of natural disasters, because of failure of the beavers, because of I'm trying to remember 51 sub 2. For these many reasons, if elections don't hold in these places, that you cannot make a return. So in a situation like Akana and Ogun State, where the margin of lead is 13,000, are you telling me that in all the places where elections didn't hold in those days, where people have PVCs, that the people registered to be are less than 13,000 across the state? So this speaks to the character and the person of the people who lead elections at the state level. Good. Rex, yes. The returning officer, then the EOs at the state level. All of these things is what I believe will play out and determine the outcome of this election. But however, we are watching closely and we're observing, and we are hoping that this election really gets concluded tomorrow. So I can go back to the drawing table and review the laws and review the electoral guidelines and start start the forms as is expected.
All right. So it's a good thing that you've spoken so passionately about the Rex and the need for experience and quite a number of other issues you raised, because just a couple of weeks ago, the PDP had alleged at the headquarters here at Wadata Plaza, of course, that they wanted the REC in Adamawa State to be changed for obvious reasons. According to them, that he was compromised. And you just alluded to the fact that some of these resident electoral commissioners might be loyal to whoever it is that nominated them, be it the governors or the politicians in that state that sent their names for nomination and onward, appointment. So doesn't this now bring an issue beforehand, that is before the supplementary election? Peradventure, for example, the election doesn't go in the way of the PDP. Isn't there a brewing issue already? Because, they would have a field day in court saying that, look, we predicted that this was going to happen. We had called for the REC to be removed or to be changed, and nothing happened. Isn't this a problem ahead of the process?
Well, like I told you, whichever way this election turns out, at the end of the day, it will be decided by the courts. I can't remember the exact number of petitions and election petitions are already in the courts. So, however this thing goes, this election will still be decided by our judiciary at the end of the day. But for the part of the court for the removal of the resident electoral commissioners, the commissioner in the state, it is completely within the control and within the INEC in Abuja to make that decision. So they may have looked at it and they feel or they decide that they go ahead, saying that, looking at it from the point of, he's resident electoral commissioner and is the only political appointee in the state. The rest from the administrative sec down to the EO and down to all the other core staff of INEC. So I believe that INEC must have also reviewed, and this is a smaller election. This election is 2,000 660 polling units. I think it's about the size of the polling units in Osun State. So what this means is that INEC should be able to deploy enough of their core staff to supervise every process of this election across the country. And as well, because it's just 2,660 polling units, I believe that these law enforcement agencies as well should be able to also deploy enough of security agencies to observe this process, particularly because one of the weakest points seen in this election, to this 2023 general election, is what we see at the collation centers, ward collation centers. In many cases, they turn these ward collation centers to battle centers where they bring in violence, where because, politicians and the way they say things, they've also understood and learned that the ward collation center is the most important chain in the result management and result handling process. That anything that they put in on that from EC8C, from EC8B, yes, continues to move that to local government, to the state, and to the final collation and declarations are made. I believe, and I want the security agencies and calling on them to provide enough security at the ward collation centers. And INEC on their own will save their face more to do the needful by ensuring that results from these polling units are uploaded on the IREF timely so that people can see it, and so that the purpose of the IREF, which is to counter the fraud that happens at the ward collection centers, will be effective, so that by the time they are trying to do the usual fraud at the ward collection centers, stakeholders would have already seen the results as sent and transmitted from the polling units as stipulated by the guidelines. So one thing that we call on INEC in this election is to call on their staff to ensure that they adhere strictly to the electoral laws and to the INEC guidelines. INEC guidelines was not put together by civil society. INEC guidelines was not put together by the federal government. INEC 2022 INEC guidelines is a guideline that was put together by INEC for her to guide her in how to go about the election, and the law gives them the powers to do so. So we are calling on INEC that as they go to these elections, that they should strictly adhere to their guidelines which they set for themselves and which Nigerians saw and believed and participated in the 2020 general election. So we believe INEC will do the needful across board so that we can have a successful election, and maybe we'll start rebuilding back trust from this election.
All right, well, this is where we will be wrapping up this discussion, but thank you so much for, the analysis, and we appreciate you for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak to us on this topic, Mr. Emmanuel Njoku. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Sagir.
All right. So that was Mr. Emmanuel Njoku, Director, Democracy and Governance Code. And I think with that, we've come to the end of Daybreak this beautiful morning. Thank you so much for staying tuned from beginning to end. We'll be back again on Daybreak on Monday morning, but, it continues tomorrow with Daybreak Extra, by the way. So I'm Dasha and Husseina Usman. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend.
And I'm Sagir Ibrahim. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.